Hey guys, it's Mackenzie from City Church Boulder, and we are so excited to invite you to join us Saturday, April 20th for a block party and Easter egg hunt here at the Holiday Neighborhood Park in North Boulder. We're going to have a bounce house, obstacle course, snow cones, popcorn, cotton candy, as well as 2,000 eggs for your kids to find, as well as some lucky ones. The block party will last from 3 to 5 p.m. and the egg hunt starts promptly at 4. It won't last long, so make sure you're here early and ready to party. Can't wait to see you there. I don't know.
Yeah,
It's Easter. Jesus is back. He's back.
Daniel, get in.
We thought he was gone, but he's back. No, we're off the scene.
So awesome. Hey guys, welcome to City Church. My name is Drake. I'm the lead pastor. So glad you guys are here. In case you're wondering, I'm wearing a microphone for our camera, not for you. And so you can hear me just like you are. And this is going to a feed so we can record our messages. And so don't be wondering the whole time, why is this mic not on? Also, second thing, welcome to Church in the Lobby, all right? This is our comfortably uncomfortable space that we're in. As we're building our team and as we're growing, we decided to make a little more comfortable environment out here rather than in the auditorium. And so next week for Easter, so pumped. We're praying for 100 people to be here on Easter. We're going to be in the auditorium with our normal full setup. And so this is just to make it feel a little more like family and home. And last but not least, as we have our conversation today, one of the things that you can help me as we have this conversation is by giving me feedback with your body language, okay? So if you're happy and you know it, tell your face, all right? That would help me a lot. And so I'm gonna think I'm funny at moments. You can pretend like I am or not. It's okay. I'm not always very funny. But as we have this conversation, it helps to know if what I'm saying is actually making sense. And so depending on how charismatic you feel in the moment, you can just give me a head nod or a mm-hmm. I don't really care how you do it. But stay with me as we have this conversation. So we've been in a series. We're actually wrapping it up today as we go into Easter, a 3-week series called Becoming Family. It's been a ton of fun. It's been slightly hilarious. You can go back online and watch those messages. The first week, we're talking about moving people from the front door to the couch to the kitchen table in the context of a home. This is about increasing in relationships and intimacy, right? And so the front door is kind of that barrier. If I invite you to my home, that's an initiation of a relationship, getting past my front door. You don't normally walk past people's front doors unless you're invited. If you do, you might get shot at or something. So most of the time it's an invitation, and the first week's message we talked about doing whatever it takes. Part of our mission is to help people find their way to God from where they are, which means that we are just crazy passionate about meeting people where they are and getting them to the front door, getting them into the family, whatever it takes, whether we have to go through the roof or the front door, it doesn't matter to us. You can go back and watch that message. The second week we talked about the couch. The couch is like that second level of growing in a relationship. And specifically we talked about as we become family, as we grow together, as we continue to reach and invest in Boulder and build community and family together, you're going to start to gather more and more imperfect people. And the problem with imperfect people is they constantly have weird moments of tension and brokenness. And if you hang out with me long enough, I'm going to hurt your feelings, that kind of a stuff. And so we talked about getting to a place where we can live comfortably uncomfortable. Just like Jesus was, constant tension of being comfortably uncomfortable, because that's what it takes to love those around you, because people are hard to love. You're looking at one of them. People are hard to love. And now we're actually at a conversation today of the kitchen table. And this whole conversation has really been around God's family. And so you're saying, whose table are we talking about? Are we talking about your table, Dre? I don't really have a table. I have a half a table. I live in Boulder, right? So when you're, the space that you use, my table folds out of the wall and you don't have a lot of room. We're talking about God's table. So it's God's family. It's his table. And the incredible conversation is that not only are we invited into a relationship with God, but then as we are coming into a relationship with God, we're also building a relationship together. And so it's a really cool picture of family. And God is on mission all around the world to bring every individual back into his family and into right relationship with himself. We've been using the language of adoption. Over and over again, we see Jesus and some of the New Testament letters talk about adoption into that family. And so today, the big idea, I'll throw it up on the screen, is come to the table. Our band is going to lead us in a song later that's called Come to the Table, I think, or something very similar. And so this is the big idea today, and I'm really excited to talk about it. Really, the invitation is join the family. So again, we're a new startup, and so part of the process is, hey, we would love for you to join this family as we grow together, build community. Man, it's so much fun doing what we get to do right now. And there's easy ways to get plugged in, taking the growth track, serving at events, you name it. But in addition to that, it's the invitation to have a relationship with God. And what's really cool is when you get around people who love you, then they can also encourage you in that relationship with God. And so here's the question I always ask when we're having this conversation is, why should you care? Right? I can prepare a message and we can talk about it, but I'm always thinking about you. Why should you care about this conversation? And here's where I'd like to start today. Have you ever thought about, so when you're looking at your life, depending on where you are in the age range and you know how long you've been on this planet, you've probably seen some people pass away, and you've seen maybe the brevity of life. Like it can be short and it can be fast and it can be long depending on what years. I remember, at 15 years old, it was like the longest year of my life because I wanted my driver's license, right? Like that seemed like forever. Now I look up and my 3-year-old is starting to look like a little boy instead of a baby, and I'm like, well, that happened really fast. And so you look at life in different ways, and one of the thoughts that I had was how do we know what counts and doesn't count in this life? It's easy when you're young to look at your aspirations and just be really busy with life and not really think about the end of the day. But I'm sure you all have heard stories or know people who they get to the end of their life and they either have some regrets because they value things that at the end of the day weren't important, or the things that they're celebrating are none of the things that we spend a lot of our time pursuing. We're probably very familiar with some of those conversations. And Stephen Covey wrote a book called 7 Habits, and one of those principles of highly effective people is beginning with the end in mind. At the end of the day, what do you want your life to count for? What's really going to matter? And it's really hard, right? The table is such an anomaly of a conversation because we see these GIFs that are making GIFs. How do you say it? GIFs? GIFs. GIFs like peanut butter and then GIF. Okay, you see these, different social media things that make fun of everybody gathering around a table and they're all on their phone sharing a meal, right? And we laugh at it, but then we also know there's truth to it. That we're constantly losing out on life because we have so many distractions. And so my thought for you is, when we get to the end of our life, how do we know what counts and what doesn't count? Because right now it's easy to just not think about that. It's easy to just care about what we care about. But odds are everyone in the room is going to care about what really mattered. And maybe you're in here and you're a follower of Jesus and you have some concepts of this idea called heaven, or maybe you're not a follower of Jesus in the room and you've heard about heaven, you've heard about this afterlife idea, and to be honest, and if you've heard about it and seen some pictures, I've seen enough cartoons that what they're portraying, if that's heaven, if it's a bunch of fat babies flying around, I don't really want to go there, right? Childcare is already not my strong point, and so if it's a bunch of fat babies with wings, they're even harder to catch, right? That's going to be really intense. And so, what's your concept of this life, and does it count for anything past the day that we die? And if it does, what are we going to? Because that kind of matters. Is it something to look forward to, or is it an eternal church service? Because some of you are like, man, I can only handle Drake for 25 minutes tops, and then that's all I got. So if it's eternity, we are in trouble. Wonder what it takes to get on the speaking list in heaven. That'd be cool to know, right? All right, so what if most of our portrayals are way off, right? What if whoever's been in charge of marketing for heaven over the last 2,000 years has done a horrible job, I think, of old English churches who paint. I don't know where fat babies came from. They're not in the Bible as far as I can tell, but they're for some reason in all the paintings. And so maybe just as important as your conversation of what this life counts for is, what do you think it takes to get in? If there is some kind of afterlife or heaven or whatever you want to call it, what does it take to get in? And we hear people say often, you've probably been to a funeral once or twice, or you hear about someone who passed away and someone will say something like, they're in a better place. We'll say that about our cats too. I don't have any cats, so I guess I wouldn't say that. But even animals, they're in a better place. But even people, right, when you don't have something to say, especially if they weren't tied to any specific viewpoint of the afterlife, then most of the time the funeral goes something like this: they're in a better place. And my question is, are they? Fat babies is not a better place to me. So what are we talking about here? Are they in a better place? How do we know? And can we make this life count right now forever? And here's what's really cool. When Jesus talked about a relationship with God, when he talked about coming into the family of God, and being able to have a relationship with one another and God, it was a now and forever thing. So depending on what your background was and where you come from, some people, they've heard about Jesus and they've heard about heaven, and it's kind of this like RSVP thing that you do, and it matters eventually when you die, but it doesn't have a lot of bearing on life right now. And so then, Jesus and Christianity or religion in general is just a later forever thing, and it might matter, but it doesn't really do much. But on the other end, what about right now? What's going on? And does it matter? And when Jesus would talk about a relationship with God and heaven, he talked about a now and forever thing. And so today's conversation, I am so pumped to have it because it's about a party, and I love to party. So here's I think I have it. The first point is that Jesus is throwing a party. So pumped about this. I don't know if you like to party, but you should, because that's where we're headed. Jesus is throwing a party. Everyone's invited. And so the invitation is to come to the table, right? One of the central pieces of a party is going to be a table. Okay, you see where this is really cool. This is some really good metaphors going on right here, guys. All right, so we're going to be in Luke chapter 14. This is a story. Jesus is going to be at a dinner party, and then he's going to tell a story to illustrate this party that he's throwing. And so we'll go to Luke chapter 14. Jesus is at a dinner party with a bunch of religious people, and these guys named the Pharisees. They're like the religious elite of the day. They think they've got this religious thing all figured out, okay? They think they've got God figured out. They think they've got heaven figured out. They think the entry fee into heaven is your good works, and so they really feel like they're doing a good job. And so then Jesus at this party, verse 12, he turns to his host. This is kind of interesting. It's pretty bold of Jesus to do this as he's hanging out in their home. He says, when you put on a luncheon or a banquet, and I want you to notice the language. He's going to use the word banquet and feast. And so imagine really extravagant, big party. He says, don't invite your friends and your brothers and your relatives and your rich neighbors, for they're going to invite you back, and that will be your only reward. Instead, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, and the blind. And then at the resurrection of the righteous, God will reward you for inviting those who could not repay you. So pause right here. What's Jesus doing? At a party, he looks at the host, he looks around at all the religious buddies that they've got there, and he says, you know what? Your guest list is not very generous. You should have invited some more people. And what is he doing? Jesus is actually taking a moment to teach the religious people who think they have God figured out about the value system of God and the party Jesus is throwing. Jesus says, hey, actually, my dad, my family, we value different things than you do. You're religious. You think that you know what God values, but actually you're missing it. And he says, listen, when you throw a party, don't invite your friends only. Not your friends can come, right? But he's like, everybody does that. If you party with the people that you like, and everybody, like anybody can do that. You don't have to be religious to party with your friends. Why? Because there's a reciprocation that happens in the relationships that you have, right? You hang out with those people because of what they can do for you. And to be honest, there's some really good friends in the room that I love hanging out with because of what they pour into me. Nothing wrong with that. But Jesus is saying, that's not what my dad is about. That's not what the family is about. It's way, way bigger than that. And then he goes on to say, why don't you invite the poor and the crippled and the lame and the blind, the outcast, those who can't repay you. It's about what you can do for them. It's not about what they can do for you. And so Jesus is teaching the value system of the family that he's inviting us into. And for religious guys who haven't quite figured it out, he's trying to help them see this. Now, here's what's really interesting, is that what Jesus is saying is include in your circle of friends those people who aren't your friends, but you're pursuing as friends. This morning, my family, we had the privilege of going over to my neighbor's house. They're from Nepal. They don't speak great English. It took me like 6 months to learn how to say their names, right? And I love them. They are amazing people. We had them write their names down on paper so I can pronounce them correctly. And that's just because I'm a white dude who doesn't speak any other languages, right? So I've got to work on that. And so we go over. They invited us over for breakfast, fed us way better food than I can cook on my own. And we had a great time. Why? For the purpose of building a relationship with people that are not maybe close friends yet, but for the purpose of cultivating that relationship. And I don't know what circles you find yourself in, but odds are there are people who you don't naturally connect with. It's not easy to connect with someone from a different country. It takes effort. It takes intentionality, but it doesn't mean it's impossible. It just takes love. And Jesus is saying, no matter where you find yourself, be intentional about this thing called hospitality. And sometimes when it comes to the issue of hospitality, we misunderstand this concept. So we think hospitality is just being hospitable in our home, like with our things and whoever it might be in the home. But when the word hospitality shows up over and over again in the Bible, it literally means something. Wow, that was like a big letdown, guys. It's not just hanging. It literally means to welcome the stranger. I wanted to make sure I got the word right. To welcome the stranger. So the Bible uses another word called fellowship. That's when Christians are hanging out together, and there's a different relationship that's happening there because of a shared belief system and value system. But then hospitality is literally welcoming the stranger, right? So you should hang out with people who are like you. That's good, and that's great for them and for you. But also, in addition to that, when you're with your friends, you should invite strangers to hang out with your friends so that in the process, they too can become friends. Does this make sense? And so then what we're talking about is becoming families. It's not only, we say often, we're not a church that simply meets on the weekends. We are a church that meets on the weekends, but we're so much more than that. And so then collectively when we're together, and then separately when we're in our homes, in our neighborhoods, in our dorm rooms, wherever we might be, we have the opportunity to continue to become family with those around us. It's really, really cool. And so then Jesus says at the end, he says then, the byproduct of you adopting these values, if you actually want to be in God's family, at the resurrection of the righteous, God will reward you for inviting those who could not repay you. Here's what's interesting. So Jesus, what is he talking about? He's talking about this idea of heaven. He'd call it heaven. He'd talk about the kingdom of God. He'd talk about this concept a lot. And so he says at that time, the resurrection of the righteous, that word simply means right with God. And here's what he's saying to the religious people in the room. He says, you think that you're right with God because of how you live and the works that you're doing and the way that you play church. But there's only one that's righteous, and it's Jesus. And so when we get adopted into the family of God, we get his scorecard, his report card. It's him. Jesus is the one that pays for that adoption. And so that resurrection of the righteous is not something that's earned, it's something that's received, that we're invited into, this invitation to come into God's family. Jesus at this time knows that he's going to give his life on the cross for all of humanity so that anyone who wants to be adopted into the family of God can. And so Jesus is throwing a party, and check this out. Watch what happens next. Verse 15. Right after this, sorry, Maddie, you got me? Yep. So then Jesus is talking about this, and then hearing this, a man sitting at the table with Jesus exclaims, what a blessing it'll be to attend a banquet in the kingdom of God. And so this religious person sitting there hears Jesus talking about the party that God would throw. And he's like, oh yeah, I can't wait to go to your party, Jesus. And in a minute we're going to see Jesus going to be like, you're not all going. It's going to be awkward. But I want you to think. I want you to imagine Jesus is sitting here. He's looking around, and as he's talking to them, he says, you know what? This kind of reminds me of a party I'm preparing. He's at this party. This kind of reminds me of a party that I'm going to throw in the future. And as he's having this conversation, I wonder, what's your picture of heaven? Just sitting in the room, what's your picture of heaven? Just in your mind, what are you thinking about? I got a couple of pictures for you. Will you throw those up for me, Maddie? I know I skipped on you. So there's your fat babies, okay? I was just Googling heaven, okay? Now, I picked this picture intentionally because they look like they're bored, right? And so, like, yay, we're not in, like, hell, I guess, but this is not that much better. Like, oh, it's so boring, right? So fat babies that are bored. Here's another one. I was thinking, okay, what's your picture of heaven? If I get to run around naked and play instruments, I might be okay with that, right? Like, if that's where we're headed, maybe okay. Or, like, I was thinking about this one right here. Like, okay, if I get to look like that in heaven, all right, maybe I could be down with that, but then probably most people are going to end up like this. Yeah. And so I was like, you know what? I'm out. If heaven's like that, I'm out. Maddie, you're going to have to get rid of that picture pretty soon. For all of us can never forget it. No, that's not heaven. Go back to Jesus is throwing a party. I realized I didn't put a slide in to get away from that, so I'm saving you guys. So listen, that's not heaven. Jesus is looking around. He's saying, listen, your guest list is not generous enough, and this reminds me of a party I'm throwing. My guest list is going to be very generous. It's going to include everyone, and my menu is going to be off the chain. You can read over and over again about this party and this kingdom party that Jesus is throwing, and it's going to have an incredible feast and a banquet, right? So we're not talking about dollar burgers from McDonald's and fries. It's going to be way better than that. So listen, I don't know what you came in with when it comes to a picture of heaven, and I might not even be able to convince you if you're not a follower of Jesus right now that heaven exists, but I want you to know that the heaven that Jesus talked about looks nothing like those pictures. It looks far greater than that. Jesus is saying, listen, I want you to imagine the best party you've ever been to. I was thinking about it, Danielle. I was asking her, some of these questions. What's the best party you've ever been to? And for me, I think it was one of the weddings that we went to. It was a generous guest list. The DJ was off the chain. I got to dance like the white boy I am. I mean, it was so much fun. And I don't know, maybe just because it's at somebody else's wedding, you can act a little more silly than you normally do. And so we had a great time, great menu. It was awesome. The whole place was just a lot of fun. I'm like, man, I had a lot of fun with a lot of friends at that party. What's the best party you've ever been to? Think about this. This is where we're going with the idea of heaven. The best party you've ever been to, the best meal you've ever eaten. What's the best meal you've ever eaten? I was asking Danielle, like, what is it for me? I had two. They were in competition. Danielle and I love to go to the Cheesecake Factory on a date and get shepherd's pie and a piece of cheesecake, and you get the delicious warm bread with the butter and it's so good. I'm like that. Then Danielle's like, I'm so hungry. And so, right, the best meal, or I have a relative named Bubba. He does not sound like his name, right? He's not as hillbilly in the woods as he sounds. His name is Bubba, and he makes the best steak I have ever put in my mouth with some mushrooms, and we get steak on the lake. I'm telling you, it is, the best meal. So the best party you've ever been to, the best meal you've ever eaten, the best memory you've ever made. What's the best memory you have? I asked Danielle, what's your best memory? She said, it's probably at my grandparents' house. They lived on a lake in Michigan, and I would sit on the swing by the lake and swing for hours and listen to music and sing. She said, that's probably my favorite memory that I have. I'm like, well, what the day you married me? What? And so, but I understand, right? There's a sentiment to it. There's a sentiment attached to it. Listen, the best party you've ever been to, the best meal you've ever eaten, the best memory you've ever made. Better than that is the kingdom of God. That's what we're going to see Jesus inviting us into. So listen, Jesus is throwing a party, and everyone's invited. And so in verse 15, this guy said, we can't wait to go. And Jesus is going to have a conversation with them to help them understand. If Jesus is throwing a party and everyone's invited, what does it take to get in? Now, listen, I don't know what you've been exposed to, but one of the things that I've seen over and over again is that Christians are often too stiff. Like if you've been around religion or church, they kind of get all lumped in the same category as what Jesus would have been about. But I want you to know, listen, we can live a life full of love to the glory of God that is a party. And so you say this now and forever thing that Jesus talked about. I want you to know, like right now is like kingdom party practice, right? We get to practice for the party that Jesus is throwing. And we serve a God who loves to be generous, and he's kind, and he's loving, and he's joyful. And we should be able to party in light and in glory of God for that purpose. But most people, religious people, do this. They look at maybe something that you shouldn't do or like God wouldn't be happy with, and they run the opposite direction. So you got a bunch of religious people in a room who just go to the extreme of oh no, drunkenness. Like, can't do that. Like, so then we're never, ever, ever going to touch alcohol, right? And there's a middle ground somewhere where, listen, you can party hard for Jesus without walking home wondering whose lampshade you're wearing, okay? Like, that's totally possible. There is a middle ground where we can party and have a good time in the name of Jesus. And I think Christians should do a better job of this. And I think because of fear, we fail to do it at times. I probably am on the opposite end, but that's okay. You can reel me back in. So Jesus is throwing a party, and watch this. Jesus replies to this man's statement, we can't wait to go. He's going to say, you're not all going. And he says, a man prepared a great feast. So Jesus is going to tell a story to illustrate the party he's throwing. He would do this often. He would tell a parable. The parables represent characters in this story. This man is Jesus, is throwing a great party, and he sent out many invitations. And then when the banquet was ready, he sent his servant to tell the guests, come, the banquet is ready. Jesus is talking about heaven. And in this culture, in this day, you had two invitations. You had the RSVP, so the invitations go out. Hey, I want you to come to my party. You want to come? People would RSVP. And then they would send the servants out again. Hey, the party's ready. Come. Okay, so Jesus is setting this conversation up. And again, generous menu, generous guest list. And it goes on. Check this out. Let's go to the next verse. The invitations went out, and all the people that RSVP'd at first, they all began to make excuses. One said, I just bought a field, and I got to go inspect it. One said, man, I just bought 5 pair of ox, and I got to go try them out. And then please excuse me. And another one said, I just got married. I can't come to your party. And all of these people make lame excuses. Listen, Jesus is throwing a party, but there's going to be a lot of no-shows. That's the second point. There's going to be a lot of no-shows. And you can go back to that verse real fast so I can show you. The first one is this. I bought a field. So listen, who buys any property without looking at it? Just drops the money, cash, no idea what it looks like. That's a lame excuse, right? You don't buy anything that holds the value of property without first checking it out, right? You would not do that. You don't just dump the cash, hey, hopefully it works out. No, that's a lame excuse. And Jesus is using this intentionally. These are not good excuses for coming to the party. Like, hey, my dad died. Okay, I guess you're off the hook, like, whatever. But this one's lame. Or this other guy, I just bought 5 pair of ox. I got to go test drive them, right? Like, what? First of all, do you test drive ox? Like, I don't know how, I got to go try them out. Like, all right, baby. Put this thing right. No, you don't go buy. This is the equivalent of buying 10 cars, 10 vehicles, right? You don't just give someone money for 10 cars that you hope are there and have all the tires, right? You don't know what you get 5 pairs of horns when you show up. You don't know. It's a lame excuse. The last one, this one's hilarious. I just got married, bro. Sorry, can't come. Right, because wives hate to go to parties, dress up, and eat good food. Like, that just makes total sense. They absolutely hate that. These are bad excuses. And here's the deal. Here's where Jesus is going with this. You're all invited to the party. Jesus is throwing a party. What he's saying is there's going to be a lot of no-shows. There's some people that have RSVP'd, and then they end up making an excuse and not showing up. So everyone's invited, but there's going to be a lot of no-shows. I want you to think about this in the context of marriage, okay? Marriage is a commitment that you make in a moment, but it's a lifetime pursuit, right? I didn't go to Danielle. Where are you? There you are. I was going to propose to you again. I didn't go to Danielle and say, hey, babe, I want you to marry me, and I can't wait to see you a few Sundays out of the year. It's going to be awesome. Like when I get, and you know what, when I need something, I'll hit you up. Like, would you marry me? I would love to see you, a handful of Sundays out of the year. It'd be great. Spend the rest of my life with you. Right. That's so, no, I'd be divorced. Or she would have never said no in the first place, or never said yes. Right. A marriage is a one-time decision that is a lifetime pursuit. And Jesus is talking about a relationship with God that culminates in a party now and forever. And he's saying you got to think about it in the context of a relationship. It's a one-time decision to RSVP, but it's a lifetime pursuit. And he's saying, man, some people, they RSVP, but they didn't really mean it, right? They got all these lame excuses. And here's the deal. Intention doesn't work in this context. Intention doesn't work in the context. It doesn't mean my relationship is perfect. It doesn't mean I'm the perfect husband. But the whole intention of that relationship is a one-time decision that is a lifetime pursuit. The same with the relationship with God. Marriage begins in a moment, lasts a lifetime. So it is with a relationship with God. It begins in a moment, lasts for a lifetime. And so here's what happens. And I don't know where, listen, this might be totally foreign to you because you've never heard of this party that Jesus is throwing, or maybe you've been around it a few times and you've heard of this party and you've heard, honestly, some of the lies about what it takes to get into this party. And so for the RSVP is, hey, you know what? I raised my hand when I was a little kid to RSVP to heaven. Like, sounded good to me. Like, cool, this guy named Jesus, I'm down. Or you know what? I was baptized as a baby. I'm going. Or you know what? I'm a good person. And I believe there's a God, so I'm RSVP'd for this party. Or, you know what, my grandparents are Christians. My grandparents are religious. I grew up in Catholic school. I'm RSVP'd for this party. And Jesus is saying, that's not how it works. It's not an RSVP without genuine intention. And so sometimes what happens is we start to make lame excuses and we get stuck in a culture that says, hey, check this card, check this box, raise this hand, say this prayer, even if you don't mean it, so that you can make sure that you don't die and go to hell, right? That's the extreme. And people try to scare you with that. I'm like, listen, Jesus spent way more time talking about the party he is throwing rather than what is available if you don't go. That's not the intention. It's not about fear. It's not about that. It's an invitation into a relationship with God who loves you and created you and has a life for you now and forever. And he's saying there's some lame excuses that we come up with. He says, oh man, listen, I'm kind of in the middle of my career. I love, I RSVP'd and I believe in God. I'm going, but I'm really busy right now. Or I got a lot of school, or I got a lot of hobbies going on. Or you know what? These are my selfish years, my single years. I'm spending my time on me. I got to work on me. Or you know what? I'm just so busy with kids. I don't have time for a relationship with God. Or you know what, my kids are gone, I'm an empty nester, and now it's my selfish years again, and I just don't have time. And we go back and forth, and we have all these lame excuses. You know what the excuses do? Listen, This is really, really important. All the excuses do is they reveal that the RSVP wasn't genuine. That's all it reveals. And you need to hear me say, I'm not saying that Jesus is saying it takes go to church, read your Bible, do X, Y, and Z to get into this party. That's not a part of this conversation. There's one way into this party, and it's with a relationship with Jesus. And it's a clear invitation. But it's an invitation that starts in a moment and lasts a lifetime. And the way that I know my love for Danielle is genuine, not that it's perfect, not that I'm a consistent, helpful husband, but that I'm committed to continuing to work on this. So listen, let me just tell you my personal story. I had heard about Jesus many times growing up. And, you know, to be honest, RSVPing sounded pretty easy. In fact, I can remember my friends sitting me down. They didn't went to church, and I didn't. And they were like, Drake, you wanna go to heaven when you die? I'm like, we talking about this now? Like, playing video games, right? But okay. So we're talking, and you wanna? And I'm like, okay. And they're like, all right, pray this prayer after me. And I'm like, okay. Close your eyes. Oh, okay. Sorry. And they literally said, repeat after me, and I did it. Like, all right, that's it. I'm like, great. I'm good. Like, all right, great. Right? Then we just went to play, back to playing video games. I'm like, well, that was easy. RSVP, baby. And nothing changed in my life. There was no desire for a relationship with God. Listen, it wasn't until 15 years old that I made a genuine decision for me personally that matched up with my head and my heart, a desire to turn my life over to God and have a relationship with him. Not because I was scared of him, not because someone pressured me into it, not because I was worried about what happens at the end of my life, but because I found out that there was a God who loved me, made me, and sent Jesus to die for me so I could be adopted into this family. And it's a motivation of love, not of fear. Religion messes this up. And I want you to see, listen, Jesus is talking to a bunch of religious people, and they think that their RSVP is in their performance. They think they're going to this party because they're such pious religious people. They do go to church and read the Bible. I want you to know there's a lot of people in America who play church who are going to be no-shows because it's not genuine. Listen, I can't read hearts. That's not my job. That's God's job. That's not what this conversation is about, okay? All I want you to do is hear me very clearly say that I'm not saying religious performance is how we get into this party. Jesus says, listen, your performance will not pay to get into this party, but actually I already paid your entry fee. It's an incredible invitation. The best party, the best memory, the best meal you've ever experienced, and I paid your way. All you got to do is trust me. It's really that simple. It's an incredible invitation. And so the opposite end, I was thinking about it. You know, like when you can like that you're interested on Facebook to an event? Right? That means nothing, right? Someone marks interested, that literally means nothing, right? It's no obligation, no anything. It just, and I think that's what happens. It's like, yeah, like, cool, I want to go to heaven probably. Like, and it's way bigger than that. It's an invitation into a relationship with the one throwing the party. So here's my question for you. What are your excuses? What are you stuck on today? What's getting in the way? If I can be honest, at 15 years old, it was just selfishness. Like, I didn't want to give my life to Jesus. I don't want to stop chasing girls. I didn't want to stop my patterns of behavior. It wasn't until I realized that there was a bigger invitation on the other side, that I was actually being invited into something better than what I had. I thought I was being invited into religion, which I didn't want. But when I found out I was invited into a relationship, it changed everything. And so what are some of your excuses? Maybe you're here, listen. It's not how many times you sat in a church service. It's about the step each day towards that party. Not that you're earning it, but because there's a genuine love desire to pursue that relationship. I've definitely not done it perfect, but I've been following Jesus since 15, and there's no doubt in my mind or my heart that was a genuine decision, and that can be yours today. Here's the next point. I already told you this. Everyone's invited. Verse 21 and 22. Check this out. The servants returned. So they make all the excuses. The servants returned. They tell his master what they said, and his master was furious. Said, go quickly into the streets and the alleys of the town and invite the poor and the crippled and the blind and the lame. Jesus is saying, my menu is generous and my guest list is generous. Everyone's invited. And after the servant had done this, he reported, there's still more room. Let's go to the next verse. Still more room. Verse 23. So his master said, go out into the country lanes and behind the hedges and urge anyone you find to come so that my house might be full. I want you to hear God's heart here. I want everyone at this party. I want everyone in my family. And listen, friends, if you've RSVP'd, if you know you're going to this party, then you're the servant. and you're being sent out. Bring everyone. You urge anyone you find to come so that the house will be full. They're being invited to the most incredible relationship you and I could ever experience. And not only will the house be full, but you and I, friends, will be full. There's no greater joy than being at a party with friends that you love. And what's really cool is when people that you never thought could be friends become your friends and you love them too. And Jesus closes that conversation. He says, none of those I first invited will even get the smallest taste of my banquet. Not because they're not welcome, but because of their excuses. Because they confused the RSVP, because they thought that their performance is what was getting them in rather than the master himself, Jesus, who's already paid the way. Here's the last point. No mo FOMO. Right there, baby. No more fear of missing out. I learned this concept this week. Danielle taught me. I feel super cool. No more fear of missing out. Bring everybody. Bring everybody. So, a couple of things. Jesus is throwing a party. You say, what now and for everything? We get to practice right now. And we should live lives that are full of joy and life and consistent partying. To be honest, we should do a better job of it. Make sure you're going to that party. That's my invitation for you. Make sure you're going. Not pressure. It's an invitation that's not forced. Relationships are not forced. That's called abuse, and God's not into that. Everyone's invited. He's not making anyone go to this party. No more fear of missing out. If you know you're going to this party, then it's our privilege to invite everyone we can to become a part of this family. Jesus paid for your invitation, and he paid for my neighbor's invitation, and he paid for my coworker's invitation, he paid for my kid's invitation. And so maybe you're here and you say, you know what, Drake, I've RSVP'd. I know that that's genuine. I don't have any doubt about that, but to be honest, I could use some help cultivating that relationship with God. I could use some help just growing in that relationship. And like any relationship, it takes work. I've been a crappy husband for a long time, right? And I'm like starting to get better at it, but it takes a lot of work. You think we're going to be any more consistent with God? The good news is he's perfect, and he is consistent and graceful and loving, and like a good dad, he's constantly there to extend grace. But maybe you say, man, I need some help. Well, listen, Growth Track is a great next step to give you some tools to grow in your relationship with God, to get plugged into this family, and also joining a group. We have city groups that meet throughout the week on a regular basis, and that's a great place to be around other people who are going to encourage you and help you grow in that relationship. Again, some of you have RSVP'd and it's genuine, and I just want to encourage you, listen, don't be discouraged. Genuine doesn't mean perfect. So I don't want you to confuse this conversation. Genuine does not mean perfect. But if you're RSVP'd, man, do whatever it takes. So this week we have the privilege of inviting people to Easter. And I'm excited about the next week's conversation because it's going to be so practical and so helpful for anyone who is just wondering about this thing that Jesus is inviting us into. And lastly, listen, if you're in here and you're like, you know what? I love the idea of this party. I don't know that I've RSVP'd genuinely. I want you to know that invitation has been paid for and you can do it today. I'm going to invite you to pray with me, and then we're going to close out our time together.